Is the market crashing? Has the bubble popped? Is it time to panic sell all of those Pokemon assets that you've carefully obtained over these last 6 months of hype? I think what it all comes down to is this, that perspective matters. Hey everybody, what's up from Pokemon Classics, reminding you that the classics never go out of style. Is the market crashing? Has the bubble popped? Is it time to panic sell all of those Pokemon assets that you've carefully obtained over these last 6 months of hype? Well, in truth, it's true that there is a large sector of the market that's experiencing a pretty significant pullback, correction, bubble burst, crash, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty severe, but it's not as bad as a lot of people think it is. Personally, I see this as one of those situations where perspective matters, and for a lot of collectors entering the community, they have a very limited perspective due to the amount of time that they've been involved in the hobby. Now, for someone like me, I've been in this hobby for over a decade, collecting cards, graded cards from PSA, and working on certain collections and watching the market trends. And in that time, I can tell you that more data is going to equal better analysis. One of our heroes of E4, fellow collector, PFM we like to call him, posted this meme in the E4 meme thread, and it's a good look at what's actually happening with the Pokemon market, how we see the sudden rise in popularity and then the subsequent dip in prices. And that means for a lot of people to panic if they have a limited out view of the market. However, if we can pull back and take a bigger look at the bigger picture, sometimes that's more indicative of the direction that the market's going as a whole. And it's undoubted that the market has increased substantially, perhaps to a point that was unsustainable in the long term, but that doesn't mean that Pokemon's not moving in a strong positive direction for the future, and that's ultimately what I want to talk about today. So today I'm going to hit you with 3 reasons not to panic, to take a deep breath and reassess the long-term sustainability of the hobby. The first one is going back to 2016, 5 years ago, when Pokemon experienced a similar situation with Pokemon Go. Secondly, we'll take a look at the K-shaped market that's currently emerging, as certain assets are doing really well in the hobby and others are retracing. There may be some factors around that to explain why, and how there's some organic interest still within the hobby informing those deviations in collecting. Lastly, we need to acknowledge that any form of correction ultimately brings some positives with it, more accessibility for collectors, as well as more opportunity on the market for people to enter the hobby or to make those acquisitions that were once out of reach. Naturally, equilibrium is something that's always going to be achieved in the long run. Whatever the market dictates are the prices and the interest, that's what the market will do. It's self-correcting. So anyway, guys, that's what we're in for today, and I hope you guys find this video helpful. To start things off, I want to address this question of why is Pokemon correcting now? And I think really it was the perfect storm of circumstances to hit Pokemon, making it as successful as we saw in 2020 moving into 2021. These factors included a massive amount of media hype surrounding the 25th anniversary of Pokemon. Whether it was Logan Paul box breaks, 25th anniversary sets, McDonald's promo cards, Katy Perry and Post Malone, these celebrities entering the hobby, there was a lot of tension and spotlight on Pokemon, bringing in other casual fans into the trading card game space. Secondly was stimulus dollars. With the shutdowns and the distribution of stimulus money to the tune of about $3,200 for the average US citizen, that's a lot of money, especially when we tack on the unemployment boost that certain individuals were receiving on top of that stimulus money. Naturally, this money had to go somewhere, and we really saw an increase in almost every asset class, whether it was the stock market, cryptocurrencies, trading cards, not just Pokemon, but sports cards as well, or even Magic cards, or MetaZoo, whatever you want to name it. All of those assets were seeing a massive boost in popularity. Lastly, there was a temporary artificial scarcity created with so many new consumers entering the hobby. In addition to places like PSA shutting down their grading services, this created an imbalance of supply and demand on the market, whether it was grading backlogs or modern rationing for products at stores like Walmart and Target. They were tough to find, and that supply is starting to catch up to demand, which is going to have an impact on the market. The first place I want to take you on this journey is back 5 years ago, in 2016, when Pokemon was celebrating its 20th anniversary. Similar to 2021, Pokemon was experiencing massive media hype and attention, a lot of this attributable to Pokemon Go, which surfaced as an international success overnight, bringing fans young and old flocking to the Pokemon franchise. This sudden spike in interest was felt throughout the Pokemon landscape, suddenly upending the stability and linear growth that Pokemon had experienced for years, at least in the trading card game. Now it was characterized by a major upsurge in prices and out-of-control demand, similar to what we're experiencing today, though on a slightly smaller scale. In late 2016, as prices began to cool off, commentators across a number of platforms, including YouTube and forums like E4, were openly debating what was in the future for Pokemon, if the market was crashing, if the bubble was popping, if prices would ever come back up to the level previously seen. And there was quite a bit of heated debate on this topic. In one post, a user talks about how growth for first edition PSA 10 Charizard had gone from $5,000 to $24,000 in just a year or two, and how that was a certain indication of a bubble. Think about this, we're talking about a first edition PSA 10 Charizard, the card that is currently selling for between $250,000 and $350,000. Just 5 years ago, people were speculating that the price point of $24,000 would never be achieved again, or at least not in the immediate future. Yet here we are surpassing that by almost tenfold, perhaps more. Others talked about how unnecessary hype from outside the Pokemon TCG, like Pokemon Go, was responsible for funneling a lot of the speculation and sudden increase in the market, a conversation we're still having today. Others commented about how certain aspects of the market or certain individual cards were still selling for record prices. Does this sound familiar? For even further historical context, we could look back to this post from SM Pratt, dated in 2017, as he recalls and comments on how the market was having the same discussion, the same situation, even 5 to 7 years earlier than that. That due to the hype of YouTube and having people opening packs and collecting PSA cards, that drove more interest to the hobby, which then saw another spike in interest. The simple matter is, this has happened multiple times in the history of the Pokemon trading card game. It happened in 1999 when Pokemon was first released. It happened again in the early to mid 2000s when YouTube became a thing. It happened again in the late 2010s. It happened in 2016 when we had the 20th anniversary of Pokemon. And here we are experiencing the biggest and most profound shift in the hobby in 2021. Now, I'm not saying all of these situations are 100% synonymous, and I'm not saying that these prices are sustainable. We may never reach these prices again. That's entirely possible. But I think the long-term fundamentals of the market are strong, and simply stating that the market's crashing, that it's a bubble, that everything is junk slabs, that everything is garbage, is just foolish, misleading, and it doesn't align with what we've seen in past precedent in the history of the Pokemon trading card game. A second reason not to panic is that the market does seem to have some organic interest. We're still seeing record prices with certain cards, even though the vast majority of the market seems to be contracting a bit. Now, I've heard this referred to as a K-shaped market, and I'm going to steal that from some of the other YouTube commenters out there because I think it's a good way to look at this. That half of the market, perhaps more than half of the market, is on that downward trend, but there are certain items that have legitimate collectability that are still rising. For example, in the most recent PWCC auction, we saw a card with a population of 3, a very popular Pokemon, the first edition Lugia from Neo Genesis, in a BGS 10. Now that is the upper pinnacle of grade for that card. Beckett very rarely releases a 10, and to see that card go for a record price of $144,000, although it might be a bit surprising, makes sense given the dynamics of that individual card. On the other hand, we've seen a retrace on the vast majority of widely printed cards that are readily accessible, and becoming increasingly available as PSA is catching up on the backlog of cards. Cards like the first edition Jungle Pikachu in PSA 10, went for $229 at the most recent PWCC auction. This is down over $400 from where they were at the peak. Now, I know this is something that I and a number of other YouTubers had discussed throughout the market hype, is that there are certain cards that lack those fundamentals. These cards are not particularly rare, commons, uncommons, or cards that don't have particularly great condition given their rarity. You know, your PSA 5s, 6s, 7s for cards that are set cards. It's going to be hard for those types of cards to sustain value when there's so many of them out there yet to be graded. Now, this is why I think a K-shaped market is actually good for the hobby as a whole. First of all, if cards are reaching record high prices, that's an indication to me that there is legitimate organic interest in the hobby. If collectors are willing to spend that kind of money, that shows that they have confidence in the market, confidence in the fundamentals that make those cards legitimately scarce and legitimately rare as collectible assets. On the other hand, as we see the market pulling back on other cards, I think that's a good thing too. Any hobby is going to be sustained by the new blood entering the hobby. It needs to be accessible to younger generations, to newer hobby members, and grow the community base. So when we see cards that are retracing, cards that are modern, that are now accessible due to print catching up the supply to the demand, I see that as a good thing, even if prices have to suffer a little bit for it. Ultimately, we need to have some market stability. It's not healthy for a market to be that volatile, bouncing back and forth. It gives collectors, investors, just people observing, whiplash. And that's not what we want. We want something that's sustainable, that's enjoyable, and is fun. And it's only going to be fun if there's a certain level of stability and equilibrium that we can rely on. Lastly, let's talk about opportunity. There's an old adage out there that says, be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. What a lot of people don't realize is when the market's reacting like this, it creates all sorts of opportunities. In this case, buying opportunities. Now, I'm not the type of person that's going to sit here and tell you to buy the dip, or that you should buy every card that's dropping in value. A lot of those cards are probably going to drop further in value. That's my suspicion anyway. But there are going to be opportunities out there. We're moving from a place of temporary scarcity, as Pokemon was at its peak of popularity and everybody was buying up cards, and grading companies couldn't keep up, and in some cases like PSA, they actually shut down and stopped taking submissions. But now we're going to transition into a place of temporary saturation as all of these cards flood back into the market, as the amount of interest wanes, and as consumer confidence dips, less people are going to be buying, and so there might be an overreaction to some of those prices for cards that are legitimately undervalued. Consumer confidence is a very powerful thing, and I think it's because of that lack of consumer confidence right now that there may be some substantial opportunities for both collectors as well as those that would consider themselves more of investors. Taking the collectors first, this is going to be a great opportunity for collectors to advance their collecting goals. And if you're like me, there are certain cards you've been seeking for a really long time that just haven't been available, haven't been accessible, or haven't been affordable. And all three of those dynamics may change in the other direction, depending on what it is that you're looking for. So as a collector, the collector in me, even though I hold a lot of cards and I sell a lot of cards and it's part of the process, I'm legitimately excited to hopefully pick up some acquisitions for my own collection. If you consider yourself more of an investor, I think there may be opportunities here as well. Often that consumer psychology impacts the market as a whole, regardless of how strong the fundamentals actually are in a given card. So with that in mind, if you're focusing on rarity, scarcity, population, popularity, the history that comes along with a card, you might find some deals here of cards that are currently being undervalued, not due to any fault of their own, but just due to the current market conditions and the psychology driving that market. So look for the long-term potential of Pokemon to carry some of these cards forward in the future. Now, I can't guarantee that'll happen, but looking back on our past, we've seen that happen in multiple times where certain cards have rebounded despite a heavy correction. And there's no reason to think that that wouldn't be possible in the future if there's strong fundamentals behind those cards. So is the market crashing? Should you panic sell your whole collection and get out now while you still can? Ultimately, I'm not here to tell you what to do. That's your decision. However, looking back on the past, there have been situations similar where Pokemon experienced a massive surge in popularity and then a subsequent retrace, and it's always outperformed in just a matter of a year or two what the previous highs were. Now, I realize those situations aren't synonymous with the massive growth that we saw in 2020 and 2021. However, I see some strong fundamentals in the hobby, whether it's the past recoveries that we've seen or the organic interest from certain cards still reaching all-time highs, or even that push for market stability moving forward. Those are all good things, and if we can return back to the linear growth that we've seen in the past, it's really just a matter of time then before Pokemon catches up to some of its larger collectible brethren out there and establish itself as one of the key collectible card games and asset classes out there that I think we all know it has the potential to be. Anyway, guys, I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the current state of the market. Things are certainly heating up and subsequently cooling down, and that's just ultimately part of the ride of any investment. I've had a lot of fun collecting Pokemon cards. Whether the market moves up or down, I'm going to find something to enjoy about this situation. It's all just one experience, and that's life. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. And until next time, remember, I'm Pokemon Classics, reminding you that the classics never go out of style. We'll see you guys with the next video. Till then, take care, everybody.